Hello and welcome back to the Father Time podcast. It's high time for Father Time. We're continuing with our theme this season, season 4, talking about talking points, various things that we want to make sure and discuss with our children before they leave the nest. Before we get to that, Matt, how's it going?
Oh, it's been going pretty good. We're real busy over here in the work, but other than that, we're good.
Busy is a good thing. So,
Yep.
been busy here as well in Marietta, and both of us still enjoying Oklahoma, I think. So that's good.
Yeah, yeah. We haven't
So,
been swept away by any, inclement weather, I
tornadoes,
guess.
right? Not yet, but we've come really close here in Marietta. So,
Yeah, yeah. You let me know how that goes.
right. So, last month we discussed a very important question: is one church as good as another? I really enjoyed that discussion. Extremely important discussion. We want to make sure that our children are well versed in that. We've got another one this month that, again, we hope that our children are going to be thoroughly equipped to handle, and that is the question, Dad, who should I marry, or whom should I marry? I think might be the proper grammar there, but regardless, you know what we mean. So that is a very very important question. I don't know about you, Matt, but it makes me shudder to think about the consequences if my children don't choose wisely when it comes to this.
Yeah. This is the same thought that I have. I mean, sometimes a parent might raise their children and they turn out well in spite of their rearing, but you really want to put your best foot forward. You want your children to go to heaven. So you want them to marry somebody that's going to help them go to heaven. I've seen people that of course, you have too, where they have married somebody that was not a Christian. And then next thing you know, they are going, going the way of the earth, they just the way of the world. And so it's not good. You want to make sure that your children know whom they should be marrying and try to um, help them out in choosing a spouse. And I know we're going to talk about some of this, but a lot of that starts at home.
Absolutely. Marriage is certainly an important biblical topic. Hebrews 13, verse 4 says that the marriage bed is undefiled, but adulterers and whoremongers God will judge. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 talks about the importance of letting people marry, not to continue to burn in the fires of lust, but to go ahead and marry. And God has given marriage in part for proper place for the marriage bed. Uh, the first marriage, of course, was Adam and Eve, conducted by God Himself in the early chapters of Genesis. And marriage is unfortunately done wrong in so many situations nowadays. We even have unscriptural marriage, divorce, and remarriage situations that often occur, and we want to make sure and teach the truth on that also. We want to make sure that our kids are very well versed in Matthew chapter 19 and other passages that deal with that subject. And we just want to make sure that our kids know that who you marry is going to have a tremendous impact on where you're going to spend eternity. And it's not to say that someone who might be married to a non-Christian, it's possible that you could win that person over to the Lord eventually. First Peter chapter 3 talks about that, how godly ladies, Christian ladies, possibly can win their husbands over. So it is possible for a non-Christian spouse to be won over eventually, but it sure would be so much better if we're on equal footing, both husband and wife, starting off right off the bat as Christians. And we want to make sure and emphasize that for our children. So, why is it so important for our children to marry not only a Christian, but a faithful Christian at that?
Yeah. Well, of course, we started off by talking about wanting our children to marry Christians so they can go to heaven, but having a faithful Christian is really the key here for that to happen. If you have someone who's just kind of wishy washy when it comes to their Christianity, then it is really just going to um, kind of determine how they're going to live their life. Are they going to Are they going to go to services even? I mean, that's going to be a question if you have someone who doesn't attend very well. Um, that could be a part of the thought process. I mean, hey, what's one service? Well, what's one service turns into two and turns into more, and just kind of coming here and there. And when you're not putting God first, then you're going to come into all kinds of problems even in your marriage. And so you really can't have a good, strong marriage without this. I mean, you can have one based on worldly principles, but it's not going to be even near what you could have if you were both faithful to God. You could think about other things here like divorce. Divorce is going to be something that might be discussed. I know that when Autumn and I got married, that was one of the things that we talked about. We said, well, divorce isn't going to be in our vocabulary. We're not going to be saying that to each other. It's not going to be a threat. We're married. We're not going to even consider that. And so, but part of that is living faithfully. I mean, neither one of us are running around on each other. Well, why? Because we're living faithfully. We're faithful Christians. That is the key. If you are going to have a good marriage, a faithful Christian spouse is really the ideal. You need that. Right. And so anything can go if you don't have that. I mean, we're talking about not only your marriage, but think about your kids. If you're going to have kids, what are your kids going to do? And let's just say that, because I've seen this quite a bit, you have the woman who is a faithful Christian, and then you have the man that she marries who's a wishy-washy Christian, maybe at best, and she's in attendance all the time, but he is not. And what happens with the kids? Well, it's hit or miss with the kids. A lot of times, the boys ended up doing what the dad does. And so if dad goes fishing or dad sleeps in or whatever, that's what the boys end up doing. And maybe the girls end up trying to follow mom a little bit more. But I've seen it to where nobody is faithful because, dad wasn't faithful. And there's a lot of statistics on that. We've discussed this in previous episodes, but yeah, you want your child to not only be a faithful Christian, but to marry a faithful Christian in order for things to really work out in their marriage and their family.
Absolutely. We want our children first and foremost to go to heaven. That's kind of the whole premise of the Father Time podcast, really, when you really think about it. We want our children to go to heaven, and who our children decide to marry is going to play a critical role. I'm not saying that it's impossible to go to heaven if a spouse is not faithful, but it makes it a lot more difficult if we're not on the same team with our spouse. And on the contrary, or the converse of that, if we are on the same team and we're both faithful Christians, not saying that we're perfect, but because we will have our moments, but if we're both striving our best to be faithful Christians, then there's going to be a boost there to help one another so that we all can be with each other in heaven one day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So we want to help our kids understand the importance of getting off the right foot when they get married. Make sure they marry a faithful Christian. I totally wholeheartedly agree with you about divorce not being in the vocabulary. I tell that to everybody that I do premarital counseling for. Is look, you don't even need to have that as an option. I realize the Bible does give one reason for divorce and then remarriage. The faithful party or the innocent party can remarry if the other person had committed adultery. But still, the ideal is for there to never be divorce. And so we want to make sure and emphasize that just don't even put that in your vocabulary because God hates it, according to Malachi. So any thoughts on that before we go to this next question?
No, let's just move on.
Okay. So the second question I have for you, Matt, is don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, the famous passage from 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14. Can we apply that verse to this discussion?
Yeah, you absolutely can. I think that, when we think about that, like just in a general context, yeah, No, I mean, um, an unequally yoked is going to be different really per person. If you're a very strong Christian, you're going to be able to handle a little bit more. But at the same time, if you're a very weak Christian, you're going to be able to handle very much. And so we don't want to be unequally yoked. We don't want to be in a position where we are going to compromise our beliefs because of other people persuading us or influencing us in some sort of way. And so, of course, when you apply that to marriage, yeah, I mean, definitely could be unequally yoked. I mean, um, I've heard of people. I don't know of anybody in particular, but I've heard of stories where people have had spouses that were atheists, and then they became a Christian. Well, then they had this atheist spouse, and it was very difficult. I've known of people, kind of talking about, having a person that is not a Christian being brought to Christ because of their spouse. And I think that is an example of not being unequally yoked. I mean, but they've go through so many hard things. I heard of a story where there was a husband that he was trying to, and this was a true story, evidently, but he was trying to get his wife to stop going to church and to worship God. And so she kept going, and she would take the kids. And so one day he knew that it was going to rain, and he's always begging her to just, come on, come back to bed. Let's just rest for a little bit, and she would always get up and get dressed and go get the kids ready, and then they would get in the car and go. Well, he, the night before, knowing that it was going to rain, went and unhooked her. I think it was her distributor cap or something, so the car wouldn't run, and maybe just undid the battery or whatever. But she didn't know what to do with it, and she said, can you come and help me? The car's not starting. And he goes, no, just come on back to bed. And she left with an umbrella and took the kids and started walking to services. And realizing what was going on, he quickly got dressed and got the car fixed and drove down the road and picked up his family and went to services with them. Later became a Christian.
Wow.
But yeah, she in that regard is not unequally yoked. She's going to continue on. But there are several people that would go, yeah, okay, the car doesn't work, okay, and just would give up immediately. There are people. I frequently get headaches. I frequently get migraines, and so I can empathize to some degree here. But I'm not going to have a complete judgment here, but I always kind of raise an eyebrow when someone's like, "Oh, I had a headache and I didn't come," and I'm like, "Well, I'm preaching nauseated, so
Yeah.
I think we tend to wimp out sometimes, and that might be a reflection of how serious we are, and so." Right. If it is legitimate, we get that. But people that are weaker are going to be a whole lot easier persuaded, And so, you've got a spouse that is not a Christian, and then someone who is a Christian, and it's going to be a tug of war all the time. And they might even get in the way. I mean, how many times do they go on vacation, and then you're like, well, hey, we're on vacation, don't go, or you're rearing your kids and you're trying to get your kids to go to VBS and stuff, and like, well, no, they got ball games, they can't go do that or whatever. They make any other excuse here. So yeah, this absolutely applies here. So don't be unequally yoked, and also don't just assume that you're super strong, because what I have found is that usually we are not as strong as we think we are. Sometimes, people just think, oh, well, I can handle that. I remember somebody telling me that they were going to go to a school that was liberal, and they're like, well, I think I'm smart enough to handle that. and I was already thinking, well, your decision making is already suspect, and you just don't realize it. So, like, I don't think that this is going to be good. Yeah, it turned out not to be that great. So, um, yeah,
Wherefore
just
let wherefore let he who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely applies.
Yeah, it does. I agree. And there's some other verses I've got here that talk about similar ideas. Amos 3, verse 3, can two walk together unless they are agreed? And then Ephesians 5, verse 11, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. If
Yeah.
we're unequally yoked, and I realize that there's a broader application on all of these verses, being unequally yoked in many different facets of life. But we're specifically talking about marriage right now, and we can make that application. But if we're unequally yoked with an unbeliever, it's going to make it so much more difficult to be what we need to be as Christians. And it's much easier to drag somebody down than to lift somebody up.
Yeah. And I think, too, especially for a woman, can you imagine this for just a second? A woman marrying a man who is not a Christian, she's going to have to submit herself to him. And that's going to be a whole lot more difficult when he's not a Christian,
Yep.
because he's going to now clearly she is not to be in submission to him, where it goes against the word of God, and Paul references that. But yeah, but in general, what you're doing is you're saying, I am willing for this unspiritual man to lead me. And that is a very dangerous proposition to make.
Absolutely. I've seen it go wrong far too many times. It's terrible. Let's go to our next question. And I want to talk about some things that we want to teach our daughters to look for in a man, a potential husband, and our sons to look for in a potential wife. I'll start with daughters, and then if you would, Matt, just add anything to this that you can think of. But what are your intentions with my daughter? Hopefully,
Yeah.
those of us who are fathers are thinking along those lines. What are your intentions with my daughter? If a guy says anything other than, well, I'm interested in getting to know her for the potential, the possibility for marriage, if he says that, we're good. That's what I want to hear. Assuming he's a good Christian young man. If he says something else, well, I just want to have fun. Red flag. And we're going to talk about some more red flags here in a little bit. But as far as teaching my daughters about, hey, preparation for marriage, I want them to know you look for a man that has the intention for marriage, not, well, let's just go out and date. Let's just go have fun. Let's get ourselves into some tricky situations and maybe we'll mess up. Maybe we won't. No, we don't play with fire on that. We need to have the intention of, hey, if this is what it needs to be for both of us to be compatible and good, the propensity towards a good, faithful Christian marriage, then let's go for that. If not, we don't really have any business dating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I saw this thing, and I showed it to my oldest daughter, and it was this guy on Instagram. He said, kids are like pancakes. Um, they usually turn out pretty well, but then you have to apologize to the first one, and shows a deformed pancake. And I'm like, yeah, we don't know what we're doing when we start, and we
Right.
get better as we go. One thing that we did, and it was kind of awkward for me because I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to do, but I really didn't know like how to implement it. And unfortunately, I didn't implement it as well as I wanted to. And I have learned this now, and I will not make the same mistake twice. But um, I took my daughter on her first date, and I said, this is how you need to be treated, and so I took her to a nice restaurant of her choice, and we both dressed up. I took her out and opened doors for her. I treated her just like a gentleman should, and and I gave her a promise ring, and I explained what I wanted from her, and basically I've said, listen, I don't know women much as well as I know guys, and so let me help you in finding the right guy, because I can see a troublemaker from a mile away, and
Yep.
so let me help you out with that. And so um, I wanted to show her, listen, you shouldn't do anything. No guy should ask for anything more than what I've done here. You know, listen, I gave her a side hug and I didn't even hold her hand. Okay. So that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And so listen, I said, this is it. This is your model. This is how it goes. And I'm, whenever a young man comes and says, hey, can I pursue your daughter? I'm going to have some questions for him. And, I might tell him no. And he could say, hey, well, buddy, you old man, I'm going to do whatever I want. And be like, well, you can do whatever you want, but not around here. So, um, I'm a fantastic shot. Just remember that,
Right.
But anyway, I'm like, listen, I'm going to teach my daughters, this is what you're looking for. This right here. This is the scenario. And then as it progresses, I'm going to give them, helpful, tips when it comes to guys. And, I've had to, uh, do this for years with, I was friends with girls that they would ask me about guys. And I just was like, they don't really care. They don't care. If they're not calling you back, they don't care. Don't ditch them. Nobody, he doesn't care about you. Not texting you back. No. I mean, if he's not like at work and can't do, no, if he doesn't want to see you, wants to go hang out with his buddies. Yeah. No, stop, get rid of them. Give a good example here. And, I guess I kind of got into a couple of red flags, but there's a whole lot more. But yeah, daughters need to be looking for one, they look for a man, not a boy. And so that usually just, discards a lot of people out there right now. And if there's any young men listening right now, absolutely do not look to the world as your example here. Running around in shorty shorts, for a dude wearing shorty shorts is just weird.
Don't
But
get me
running
started.
around in your shorty shorts and your piercings and all that stuff, no, that's not, you don't even know the first thing about being a man. I can guarantee you that. So we're not looking for that. We're looking for real men. We're not looking for boys. And boys sometimes need time to grow up. And so let them grow up and then find a man. Don't get a boy. Don't ever get a boy. So, and if
That's
you're not
great.
old enough to date a man, you're not old enough to date.
Yep.
So,
Man, that's great advice. I've got a couple more written down here. Where are his eyes focused when he's interacting with you? Where are his eyes focused? What about when he's out and about? I realize there's a ton of guys that struggle in this department, and I'm not even suggesting that there might not be a young man who's really striving to be a faithful Christian that may struggle to an extent with this, but he should be able to show you whether he's trying to practice self-control or not. And if he is just gawking all the time, that's not the guy that you want to be looking for. Is he going to be a provider? Does he expect you to be the provider instead of him? That's a biggie to me. Does he participate in worship? Does he answer questions in Bible class? Does he actively pray during prayers? Does he sing? Or does he keep his arms crossed during the singing? How does he treat his mother and his sisters and his father, for that matter, his grandfather, his older folks in the congregation? Does he desire to have and provide for and protect children? Or is he a guy that says, I don't want children? That's not. I realize we can get into some personal decisions of couples and that sort of thing, but a guy that says, I just can't stand children, that's not what you want to look for. What are his political views? Is he in favor of some of the crazy stuff that's going on today with abortion and LGBTQ and all that? He's no good if he's in favor of that stuff. As far as our sons, looking for a potential wife, does she participate in worship? Does she sing? Does she pray? Does she read her Bible? Does she maintain a quiet and gentle spirit? Or is she very loud and tries to assert herself over men? Does she wear modest clothing? Is she respectful? Is she respectful toward her parents, especially her dad? Does she submit to her dad, or is she rebellious? What are her thoughts about having children and the keeping of a home? Is she knowledgeable in God's word? How does she treat her father, her mother, her siblings, older folks, little children? Does she love little children? Does she love to hold babies and things like that? These are the kinds of things that I want to focus on for my son and my daughters, as we talked about previously, to make sure that they're not just approaching finding a spouse casually and, well, whatever happens, happens. No, be proactive in looking for these kinds of things.
Yeah, we need to teach our sons to be attracted to the right kind of women.
Yes.
I remember this, and this is kind of something that I'm ashamed of. But I remember, we watched all kinds of things growing up, and you'd always have some guy going on a date with a girl that was immodest, and they always had that same reaction of, wow, she's so beautiful, and like, I'm so lucky to be going out with this girl. And I had never experienced that. And I went on a date one time with somebody that was evidently rather worldly. I didn't really know this at the time. But when we went out, I was too ashamed to say anything to her. What I should have done was just walk away and go, all right, I'm not going anywhere with you. But she was dressed, how do I say this nicely? I don't know how to say this nicely other than immodestly, but she dressed kind of like a prostitute. And I was like
trying
okay.
to entice.
Yeah. And I was like, I was embarrassed, by it. And, I was a Christian at the time too, new Christian, but, I went
Was
from
she supposedly one?
not very strong. Yeah.
But
So
she
like just
claimed
kind
to
of,
be one.
yeah. And so I was flabbergasted. And back, like I said, growing up, like that was like you would have thought, oh, this is cool because every guy goes in the movies like that she's amazing. And I'm like, no, like this is not right. And this is not good. And I remember like trying to figure out a way where we were not like going places where we could be seen, that people would know that this person was with me. It was like, hey, um, let's go to this restaurant. I don't think anybody I know would ever go to this restaurant, like Thai food. You like Thai food? Like, I've never had it. It sounds great,
Nobody I know goes there, but
Yeah. So I was like, oh, it's so embarrassing. But yeah, look for the right things that attract. I love all that list that you gave. I think a good thing to think about and to kind of hone in on is that submissiveness, knowing that is a part of the will of God for a woman to submit to her husband. Obviously, uh, in the dating relationship, she is not submitting to you, but you want to see that she submits to her parents, and
right. Does
and
she have
that
the potential to submit when the time comes?
right, yeah. So looking for more than just looks, is the thing. Of course, every guy is gonna marry someone who he thinks is pretty, but they've got to be pretty on the inside too.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys make that mistake where oh, she's just so pretty, and it's just pretty on the outside, not pretty on the inside, and that's gonna be a detriment.
Well, and we could even get into the topic of, a lot of people are in lust and not
Yes.
truly love, which is love
Yes.
is not lust. I mean, a husband and a wife can certainly be attracted to one another in that way because they're married. But what I'm saying is, love is an action verb. It is something that you do, not just this butterfly feeling in the pit of your stomach and attraction, uh, married type attraction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are dating when they're letting those feelings call all the shots, really before those feelings ought to be felt. Those feelings are reserved for marriage itself.
Yeah. And a lot of people even try to justify those feelings by, oh, I feel like I'm married, you know.
Yeah, I feel
Um,
like I'm married, or we've been dating for 5 years, which
yeah.
is a bad idea.
Yeah.
You-
I actually told this story to somebody the other day. I accidentally, I think, may have been responsible for a breakup because of this. But I was, there's some people had been dating. I think it was like 9 years, and I said, like these were Christians. I was like, wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. I don't think that I could be dating someone that long without doing something wrong. I mean, if you love somebody, you know, and I was like, so like kudos, like I just kind of like that. And then, coincidentally, they had been doing things that were wrong. And so they were like, oh, well, no. So, um, and, look, I know there's a lot of people have made mistakes, and I'm not, you know, criticizing mistakes. What I'm trying to do is to illustrate that there's certainly a better way, and we need to be
Absolutely.
thinking more Christ-like. And I wish I had had more of that influence growing up. I've made a lot of mistakes myself, and I really wish that I could take that back. I've told my wife um, that I really wish that I never dated anybody before her, and I did. I mean, I dated several people before I found my wife, um, but I really wish that I never gave anybody the time of day, because every time you do that, I think we have to be honest. It's almost like you're not literally doing this, but it's almost like you're giving a little piece of your heart away every time.
Yeah.
And then
Even if
in the
there's
back,
not, even if there's nothing sinful that takes place, but even if you
right,
just date somebody,
right,
um, without marrying them, and then you date another person without marrying them, and you didn't sin, although
yeah,
many times sin does happen, but even if you didn't,
right,
you're still giving a piece of your heart to that person, and
right,
it's like divorce prep essentially.
yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the point I'm making, is that you know, instead of just saving it for one person, um, you're like trying on marriage, if you will.
Right.
Um, obviously, hopefully without the benefits of marriage that you're trying on, but you're like, you know, even in a Christian way, you're just dating somebody and spending all your time with them and your efforts, and then that ends up not being the one. Well, what kind of a comparison then do you have? Like, you're thinking about, oh, this guy treated me this way and he's better than that, and then she goes and dates somebody else, and you're being compared to the previous person.
Hmm.
So anyway, there's some complications with that. I'd encourage people to tread lightly and to go into relationships cautiously.
I agree, and even some people call it courtship. I think
Right.
courtship, or you call it dating, but it's more courtship modeled. I think can be a better plan. And maybe you talk to a guy for a week or two and see, okay, this guy's worth pursuing as a very likely marriage or
Hmm.
not. 2 weeks comes and you're like, this is definitely not going to work. Then you move on without giving your heart to that guy. And I think that dating, as has become the norm in our society, is really detrimental. Even if there's not sinful stuff going on, which again, most of the time, let's be honest, a large percentage of the time, sinful stuff is going on. But even if it's not, you're giving your heart to people and then breaking up. And then you give your heart to another guy and break up and rebounding. And it's just not good. It's not healthy. Uh, we need to uh, we need to go into a situation where this guy looks like marriage potential. Let's feel it out just very carefully for a couple weeks. He is marriage material. Let's do a fairly quick engagement and get married, because dating for 7, 8, 9, 10 years it's not a good plan.
Yeah, yeah. You're just begging temptation is all you're doing.
You're playing with fire.
Mm-hmm.
Last question: Can we identify any red flags that might be found in a particular young man, and what about red flags that might be found in a particular young woman?
I think first of all, you need to look at the relationship between that person and their parent of the opposite sex. If a young man treats his mother poorly, he is going to treat his wife poorly. If a young woman does not respect her father, she's probably not going to respect her husband. And listen, I know that some people go, well, someone's father or mother died. And I'm like, well, of course, you're going to be flying blind in that regard. I get that. Other people might go, well, but my father or my mother was not a Christian, and they kind of deserved what they got. And it's like, well, no, there is still a respect that is given to parents. And so, yeah, if they tell you to disobey God, you don't do that. Acts 5:29, obey God rather than men. So, yeah, that's understandable. But just by and large, how they treat their parents is going to be a big thing. When it comes to young women, the big thing about red flags, everybody talks about red flags these days, and I think they take it too far. I've seen like girls say, well, here's a red flag for me. Does he take selfies? And I'm like, well, that's kind of a double standard because you take selfies.
Right.
Like, okay, so I mean, I'm not a big selfie guy, but maybe there are guys that take selfies. I don't know. But
I was at the Grand Canyon. I had to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, like I do. Like if I could catch an eagle in the background, man, I'm taking a selfie with an eagle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to take a selfie with me and like The Rock. I don't know, but I don't know. Yeah, there are some things I think people just take too far. But there are some decent red flags that you need to consider, and they do deal with all these spiritual things. If a person is not respecting their parents and trying to run away from home and whatnot, well, that's probably an issue. You can live at home and be a Christian. Will it be difficult? Under certain circumstances, sure, yeah, it would. But there's still just a realm here of respect that you need to have for your parents. I think about for a young man, you need to think about if a girl is being too touchy-feely. While that might be attractive, that's a red flag. Run away.
Can we get into that a little bit? A lot of times there's a problem if a girl in particular is looking for touchy-feely.
Yep.
She's got some major issues typically where there's a dad not present or some kind of problem where maybe it's a split up home or something. She doesn't have a proper relationship with her father, and you got to watch out for a girl like that.
Yeah. The statistical information out there about this in the psychological world is just astounding to see how the father affects the daughter. I have laughed about this. There was a woman that she was, got on Instagram, and it's just one of those videos, and she says, my body count is this many, and it was astronomical, like how many people she had been with. And this other girl, like she's like in a hoodie, like in a room, and she's like, Yeah, probably would have been like that too, except my dad, he always said this annoying phrase. What was it? Oh yeah, I love you. It's like, and it's true. It really is true that
It's
if a
sad, really.
father, yeah, if a father gives the right attention to his daughter, she's not going to go seeking it from somewhere else.
Another guy.
And yeah, right. And so, um, yeah, you just got to remember that, dads need to take an extra interest in their daughters if they want them to marry someone substantial. And then, same thing, they need to spend time with their boys and show them how to be gentlemen and show them how to treat women. Um, but they need to be there for the daughters so the daughters know what it is that they should be looking for. And and if they, go over and give your daughter a hug and kiss her on the forehead, and fulfill some of that for her so she doesn't have to go looking for it anywhere
Yeah.
else. And one day you're going to hand over the reins to somebody else, and you won't be doing that as much anymore. And she will find fulfillment in a different way, being a wife and mother. But yeah, right. As for right now, when there are girls that are extra flirty and extra touchy and all that kind of stuff, you know,
Run like
uh,
Joseph.
yeah, it is not good, and it's usually the dad's fault. It really is. It's usually
Yeah,
the dad's
I agree.
fault. And so, if you're listening to this right now, go ahead and get mad with me, but then go ahead and look at the statistics, okay? And you're going to find that, yeah, it's your fault. So cowboy it up and get going and do something better.
Yeah, and as far as like the touchy feely thing, girls need to watch out for a guy. Obviously, I mean, even more
Right.
obviously, a guy that's touchy feely, that's putting his hand where it shouldn't be, or goes in for the big front hug instead of a side hug, that sort
Hmm.
of thing. You got to watch out for him too. I mean, you're getting yourself into a dangerous situation, um,
Yeah.
spiritually and even physically. Dangerous
Yeah.
situation with a guy like that has no boundaries. As far as girls looking for a young man, and red flags for him, I have written down if he has no drive, if he seems to like not have any accomplishments, and there's all kinds of things that you could think of that a guy might have that would be a list of accomplishments. Maybe it's he makes really good grades. That's a good accomplishment. Or maybe he's involved in a sports team and he works really hard, or he's in scouting or martial arts or 4-H, or he works on a farm and he works really hard and does a good job in the hayfield. Does he accomplish anything? Or does he have no drive whatsoever? He has no game plan for the future. He doesn't know what he wants to be as far as occupation goes. He just goes home and plays video games all the time.
Yeah.
Major red flag. You've got to look
Yeah.
out for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, going back to this young man, how does he look at your parents?
Mhm.
I mean, does he respect your parents? By the way he treats you. If your parents say, "Want you back at 10 o'clock," is he trying to bend the rules, or is he getting you
Yep.
back by 10 o'clock?
Yep.
Is he being responsible? Is when he's talking about your parents, is he talking about them in a respectful way, like, "Oh, I really like your dad," or "I really like your mom"?
Is
Um,
he irresponsible with your safety? Is he driving 100 miles
oh
an hour
yeah,
down the road trying to show off?
yeah, right,
If
yeah,
let me say this, if there's any young ladies listening to this, if you're interested in a guy and he has to show off by lifting his truck uh, umpteen feet off the ground and has the loudest muffler and drives like a crazy person, 100 miles an hour everywhere he goes, if that's how he has to impress you and play in the loud rap music and all that, look somewhere else, please.
yeah,
Please look
yeah.
somewhere else.
And maybe look for some better qualities.
Yeah.
That's really the thing there. Um
His
I've
daddy
found that.
paid. His daddy paid to jack that truck up anyway, so
Yeah.
guarantee it.
Well, it's kind of funny, we look at those like as guys. We're like, hey, want to be the sports star and do all that kind of stuff. You know, I got married and my wife was like, "Meh." I was like, "I can throw a football really well, though. Like, isn't that cool?" Meh, you
Yeah.
know, like, nah, you know, or
Shania Twain doesn't impress me much or whatever.
yeah, it was just like,
Bad reference, but
yeah, I was like, "What? I've been working my whole life for this." And then it's like, this is not what she was looking for. Now, little did I know what I should have been doing for my wife's sake because she was reared right is, you know, I could have been studying my Bible and preaching. I could have been
yeah,
leading singing and leading
that would have been
prayers and
impressive.
those things. And that would have been what impressed my wife more than
Yeah,
all those other things. Like, oh, you can you like how much can you bench press? Like, is that good? I
yeah,
don't oh, who cares? You know,
right.
like, you know, but you know, it's just it's funny how we look at things and then how women look at things. And in the long run, how impressive is it that you can lift some certain weight,
Yeah,
you know, you're gonna impress guys, not women. I'm gonna tell you that
nothing
right now.
wrong with being able to bench press
Sure.
800 pounds or whatnot, but
Yeah.
but that's that's not the spiritually impressive thing. And
No, no.
um,
And you going back into the red flags, you know, is he gonna protect you?
yeah,
Or is he a scaredy cat gonna run away?
right.
You know, those are good things to ask and to look for.
Is he humble, or is
Yeah.
he like super arrogant and cocky? Don't get me started with that. But
Oh, yeah.
very,
Yeah.
you can tell that very quickly.
Mhm.
Does he give a
Absolutely.
nice? Does he look you in the eye and give you a nice firm handshake and say, "Hey, I'm so and so, and glad to meet you," or he's like, I'm better than you, and just
Yeah.
arrogant.
Well, and in all of this, you want, number one, as a child, to have a good relationship with your parents and be able to ask them questions and seek their advice in any of these things. At the same time, you want this young man or young woman to be able to look at you in those same ways. Okay, so this is the parent of the person I'm interested in. Can I talk to them? You know, and I think that if you've got a person like literally, if there's a guy that was interested in my daughter, any of my daughters, and they could, you know, hit all those things, and then they're good to talk to me. They're not afraid of me. And listen, I'm not going to make that easy. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm just a happy-go-lucky guy. I'm not going to
You're the
make it
parent.
easy.
Yeah, you're the
Yeah,
parent. You have the upper hand for a reason.
yeah. So but all that being said, hey, can they come and talk to me? They need to be able to talk to me. They need to
Yeah.
be and brave enough to talk to me or my wife in regards to anything, and namely our children. So
Yeah. And there's a difference between a guy who's just a little shy, which can be fine, versus
yeah,
a guy that, he's up to no good and that's why he doesn't want to talk to the dad.
right,
So,
absolutely.
and we can see that as dads. We can see that from a mile away.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's most of the things I had on my list. Of course, obviously the obvious things. Does he or she listen to inappropriate music and watch
hmm
inappropriate TV and movies and stuff? That goes without saying. Uh, what are their social media posts like if they have social media? Do they spend way too much time on social media,
yeah,
which lots of kids do nowadays, unfortunately? But is he
yeah.
making inappropriate jokes? Things like that.
Here's one that we need to say. I just thought of it is how do they receive correction?
Yeah,
Because I mean, listen, none of us are perfect. If we're going to look for the perfect spouse, nobody's going to get married.
right,
And
exactly.
so, I've known of people who are like, well, they didn't fit the bill, and I'm like, well, congratulations, you don't fit anybody's bill either. So,
Right.
if we hold you to the same standard you're holding someone else, nobody's getting married. But yeah, like there are going to be things that need to be corrected. And like you said, like I think a lot of people would maybe listen to the inappropriate music or watch something inappropriate, and then as a
You might
Christian,
talk to them about it.
yeah, how if you talk to them about it, how do they respond to that? Because if they don't respond well and they get mad, well, congratulations, they're a baby.
Yeah,
Don't
just write them off.
But if they can take some correction with some reason, yeah, okay, let's consider that.
My wife was not a Christian when we first met. And she was kind of a multi-denominational person, just kind of here and there and everywhere. And I knew that she was legit because this was a deal breaker for me. I wanted to, keep an eye on this, whether or not she was going to become a Christian. And I knew that it was legit because she came to me. I didn't pressure her at all. She came to me and said, "Hey, I need to be rebaptized. I wasn't baptized for the right reason." And I could tell that she came to that situation with an honest heart. And I was so thankful when she came and was converted that day. But I'll tell you right now, myself and my wife both, when we were younger Christians, there were some things that we have improved on in the last several years that we thought were no big deal back then. And so we're not saying you have to find, like you said, we're not saying you have to find Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect, but is that person moldable? Is that person willing to study the Word of God and let that Word of God do its work and give correction and reproof and rebuke when needed? So if that person takes criticism well, takes correction well, then that's a good sign, a very good sign. One last question. What about, I talked about my situation. My wife was not a Christian when we met. It worked out for us, and I'm so thankful for that. I will say that's really not the ideal situation, in my opinion. There are some people who can, like my wife did, out of a pure and honest heart, convert to Christ, and that's wonderful. I would just caution our listeners, especially young people, if you've got your eyes on somebody, please be very careful with that kind of situation because they might convert, quote unquote. They might pretend convert just so that they can get the girl or get the guy, but then their heart's not in it, and then you end up unequally yoked. So just be very, very careful with that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I was blessed to be able to find someone which at the beginning of our marriage, I would say that, my wife was a stronger Christian than I was. And as I've grown, we've both grown. And I'd say we're on pretty level playing field together. But I've known of people who, matter of fact, Autumn's grandmother, one of her grandmothers, married a non-Christian, married someone from a denomination. And at the end of her life, she said this, and I was kind of flabbergasted that she said this, but she said, I love my husband, but if I could do it over again, I wouldn't have married him. And I've heard several people say something along those lines. Where it's like, yeah, it would have been easier. Life would have been easier if I'd done it a different way. And that was the major criticism that they had on their own life.
Yep. Yeah. Again, the point of this episode is that this is one of the most important decisions you can ever make is who you're going to marry. So if it's fathers listening to this, I want to encourage you or mothers, but parents listening to this, make sure that you talk about this with your kids and emphasize heavily. This is the most important decision apart from becoming a Christian. This is one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make. It will make a very important impact on where you spend eternity and where your children spend eternity. And those who may be young people listening to this who have never married yet, please, I implore you to choose wisely. This is an extremely, extremely important topic.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you, Matt, for helping us with this another episode. This was season 4, episode 4, Who Should I Marry? Which means that we've got one more episode for this season. It's hard to believe that our season is coming to an end very soon. Next month, we're going to be talking about defending God's word. So kind of an apologetics style episode. We want to make sure that our young people can handle that, because that's another very important topic that our young people are going to have to deal with. Appreciate you for tuning in to the Father Time Podcast.